Thank you very much to everyone who has come out tonight to see us for what I hope is a really enlightening and also motivating conversation, especially given that it is a weekday and I know a lot of you would have had to rush from work or care arrangements, so thank you very much for that. My name is Amy Remeikis. I'm Chief Political Analyst at the Australia Institute and proud Queenslander until I die. Yay, Queensland! I would like to begin by acknowledging the Jagera people and the Turrbal people as the traditional custodians of Meanjin, the lands on which we are located. It's more important than ever that we notice what country we are on and pay tribute and honour to our elders, emerging, past and present, especially since we all know that the LNP government are doing everything that they can to erase any of the tiny bit of progress that we have made in actually just acknowledging that there were people here before us. So I would also, in that vein, like to extend respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are present tonight. Before I introduce Richard, I'd like to just play a short video of some of the achievements of the Australia Institute that we could not have done without you. As well as, again, thank you very much for attending. So let's play this little video, which I think I make an awkward cameo in.
A think tank, a group, looking at the overarching principles. One of the things that makes it special is that it encompasses all the issues confronting Australia.
The Australia Institute, it's revealed that 2/3 of people in this country believe corruption is common.
The Australia Institute shows 90% support for rules around truth in political advertising.
Well, more than half of the gas exported from Australia is royalty-free, according to research from think tank the Australia Institute.
The Australia Institute.
The Australia Institute.
The Australia Institute.
In Norway, they tax their fossil fuel industry and give their kids free university education. In Australia, we subsidise the fossil fuel industry and we charge our kids a fortune to go to uni. Tell me politics is boring.
The question isn't whether Australia has the capacity to lead with integrity. The question is whether the people in this building have the courage to do it.
Poverty is a policy choice. These are things that can be addressed. We know how to do them.
We do have the right to have some hubris because we should all be hoping for better.
Industry in Australia, households in Australia want cheaper gas. All Labor have to do is make one group sad, the foreign-owned gas industry.
We can have a really big influence on rebuilding or building the institutions of international law after Donald Trump has dismantled them.
This great submarine deal is almost certainly going to result in us having no submarines. It's a terrible, terrible mistake.
Government has to change its view.
Destruction of native forests.
Australia is one of the biggest consumers of fashion per capita in the world.
Climate integrity.
A whistleblower protection authority.
Record profits and price gouging.
To have institutions like the Australia Institute doing original research that underpins the arguments of those who want to reconstitute the dream of democracy, that is the greatest gift to anyone who wants to keep the idea of democracy alive.
So that was just some of the highlights and proof that just like the royals, I too like to repeat an outfit. But again, we could not do what we do without your support. So thank you to absolutely everyone who is here tonight, and especially those who put through an extra donation when purchasing tickets for tonight. If you'd like to support the Institute, you can have a chat to Hannah at the registration table outside after the event. We even have tap and go. We are across all of the tech, and donations are also tax deductible. But most importantly is you actually coming out and turning up in person, to listen to these conversations, to have these conversations with the people around you, and to try and push as many people to care as much as you do. That is just as important as the financial contributions that you make, so thank you. And in that vein, you may have also have noticed, unlike Oprah, it's not a car, it's an AUKUS petition card on your seats. The Australia Institute has been pushing for a parliamentary inquiry into AUKUS, which was a deal signed pretty much just between Scott Morrison and Boris Johnson over some drinks.
Yeah, a couple of beers and $360 billion later and we get the hangover.
Yeah, just what's $360 billion between friends. So the Trump administration has launched a review of AUKUS, which will probably include extra conditions for Australia, like just sending us to war because America decides to go in one. The UK has reviewed AUKUS. We are the only major member of that pact not to even look at it, despite having given $1.6 billion to the United States to build these submarines for themselves in the hope that eventually they'll get around to building them for us as well. So if you'd like to join the petition, there's a QR code, like I said, across all of the tech that will easily take you to the site, and you can do that. But let's get down to the business of what we are here for. You all know Dr. Richard Dennis, I hope? So Richard is Executive Director at the Australia Institute. He is probably one of Australia's most annoying, in a good way, economists, depending on which politician that you speak to. And he's spent the last 2 decades across many policy-focused roles in academia, federal politics for his sins, and think tanks. And his latest book, Dead Centre, How Political Pragmatism is Killing Us, is the 2nd edition of the Vantage Point essay series, which the Australia Institute has launched. And you were just telling me before, Richard, that it was here when you were launching another book that Jim Chalmers set all the bees running away when he talked about wanting to do a well-being budget.
Yep. I don't know, was anyone here when Jim Chalmers launched one of my books here? Yeah, a couple of hands up. I don't know if anyone remembers, but that night Jim gave a speech about well-being and how measuring, gross domestic product, GDP, wasn't the be-all and end-all, and that maybe as a society we should kind of broaden the things that we measure. And while he was just giving a speech at my book launch, he talked about how a Labor government would put more effort into measuring the things that matter, measuring well-being. And the next day in Parliament, the Liberals latched on to this gaffe, because what it meant was that Jim wanted everybody to do yoga and wear caftans. And I'm not kidding, this was our then government, with our then Treasurer Josh Frydenberg leading the charge. And then the day after that, the Australian ran on the front page, this embarrassing gaffe that a potential treasurer might think there was more to life than GDP. So yeah, for those that remember that night, you might not have realised how silly it got after that. But then again, who's Josh Frydenberg again?
So speaking of Josh Frydenberg and the Dead Centre, let's... Thank you, here all night.
It's a warm crowd, isn't it? It's because you said you were a Queenslander. Yeah. They haven't stopped smiling since.
So, this book was born out, I think, of a series of conversations about what is wrong with Australian politics. And as Richard was writing it and then rewriting it after the election, which, just put a slightly different slant on things, I think it's fair to say. We had several conversations about what centrism is, why it has poisoned all of our institutions, particularly politics and also by extension the media, and why more people actually probably need to be awake of what the dangers of centrism. So what do you think centrism is?
Well, good question. First, I'll talk about what other people seem to think centrism is. So one idea of centrism is that it's kind of anywhere in between the boundaries set by the Labor Party and the Liberal Party. So Labor think we should do this and the Liberals think we should do this, and the media kind of live in this space in between the two. Now, that version of centrism is dangerous for all sorts of reasons, but the main one is that when the major parties agree, when the holy grail of bipartisanship exists, there's no space between them at all. And any other opinion is extreme. Any other opinion is silly. So if they both support AUKUS, then how could anyone oppose AUKUS? If they both support fossil fuel subsidies, how could anyone oppose fossil fuel subsidies? So one version of centrism is just, well, you know, the major parties kind of have marked out a sort of centre-left, centre-right terrain, and anything in the middle is where the room for debate is. Sociologists call that the Overton window, you know, the sort of culturally acceptable boundaries for polite debate. So that's kind of problematic, and we can talk about why, but that's one definition. And the other that often people kind of think of as centrism is, you know, evidence-based policy. The very, you know, well, let's just look at the evidence and we'll be sensible and we'll follow the evidence. But I hate to break it to you, evidence is often quite radical, right? Evidence says we really should, you know, do some things that the Labor Party and the Liberal Party would not touch with a barge pole. But again, the way the media act is if, well, we have to live in the sensible centre and we need to base policy on evidence. And then you say, well, the evidence says if we keep building new coal and gas, we're cooked. Oh, that's extreme, Richard. So, no, that's literally what the evidence says. All right, what's extreme is ignoring the evidence. And the fact that both major parties will ignore the evidence kind of speaks something about them, but it doesn't speak to the evidence. So centrism can just be politically pragmatic between Labor and Liberal. Centrist can be all based on the evidence. It could be based on what most people want. But then when we look at them all together and we say, well, you know, most people want to, you know, ban on poker machines or gambling advertising. Most people want that. Most experts want that. But neither major party want that. So what the hell does centrism mean when it's all of those? It's probably none of those.
And I guess one of the issues when talking about centrism is that we like to picture it as in the centre, but it's somewhere over here now.
Yeah.
Like the centre keeps getting dragged further and further to the right in most Western democracies. Australia is not immune to that. And yet the centre for the media just keeps, even though it's shifting further and further to the right, whereas me, who, you know, I'm centre-left, I'm no radical, but I'm now considered a radical because the window has opened up so much that, you know, wanting an end to genocide and housing for people and a livable wage is suddenly like a radical concept. We never actually adjust in the media our thinking for the fact that the centre has moved. And we don't see the supposed centre-left party do anything to drag the centre back. So how do we counter that when we're talking about centrism?
Yeah, look, great question. Now, I don't know if there's anyone in this room old enough to remember the Howard era. Maybe one or two. All right. So at the end of the Howard era, the 2007 election, when John Howard was up against Kevin Rudd, John Howard went to the 2007 election proposing a carbon price. Kevin Rudd went to the 2000 election proposing a carbon price. Pretty much every economist, not the most progressive group in the world, pretty much every economist thinks a carbon price is a simple way to tackle climate change. So back in 2007, you got John Howard, Kevin Rudd, and the economics profession saying, yeah, carbon price. Can haggle about the details, but of course you'd want one. Fast forward to 2025, Labor Party, Liberal Party, no way they're having a carbon price. So it's not centrist to talk about it anymore, even though John Howard used to support it. So to your point, Amy, yeah, the debate has just gone so far, I don't know, I'm moving to my right, so far to the right that to now even say, well, you know, here we are with a Labor-elected landslide government, everyone says we should be doing tax reform, everyone says we should be looking at productivity, all right, we're going to have a big chat about what we could do. Apparently we can cut the company tax rate, that's not radical. Apparently we can invent a whole new kind of tax, a cash flow tax, that's not radical. Or are we allowed to talk a carbon price at that meeting? Don't be stupid, Richard. What are you, some sort of crazy man? You're more radical than that John Howard. Right, so...
I've often said that.
So the problem, I think the media's got lots of problems. I'll put it back on you. Like, you're closer to them than me. What you think about why the media are like this, but the media so pride themselves on possessing a particular skill, and it is a skill, and there's value in this skill, but they're so proud of the particular skill of being able to anticipate what will Albo say about that. What will Susan Lee say about that? What will Dutton say? That would wedge them, and then right. And they're actually really good at sort of forecasting in the moment how a particular thing will be received. And that's of some value to us as a body politic. That's of some value to us as citizens. But the idea that we're not allowed to have a democratic debate about a simple idea because Albo won't do it. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think the major party vote is on the slide, and one of the reasons why more and more people just kind of tune out of politics. Because, to have an idea that sits outside that party-defined centrism is extreme or crazy or never going to happen. So, people tune out. And by the way, they've tuned out from the media as well. So, I don't know, what do you reckon?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what did you tell me today? How many people are now enrolled to vote since the end of the John Howard government? Yeah, so since Howard, and this is in the book, by the way, so since Howard lost office at the end of the since the beginning of the Howard period, 12.8 million people have either moved to Australia or turned 18 and enrolled to vote. So while the media still hark back to the Hawke-Keating era, even it's democratically, it's ancient history. But for the press gallery and so many people in Parliament, it's kind of everything. So I think, you put it back on me. I was asking you about the media. Yeah, well, I just think it's interesting because we were having discussion about generational change, and pretty much since Menzies, political power has sat with the boomer generation in Australia, biggest generation. So of course that's where the political power has sat. But at the last election, when you count Gen Zs and millennials, the generational baton has changed because of what I like to call the linear nature of time. And so that means that the political power now rests with a generation that can't afford housing, has not seen the wage growth that their parents or grandparents have seen, is seeing a falling in standards of livings in a way that their parents and grandparents have not seen. And I saw a figure recently that said that if you wanted to match the market power of the 1970s, so the buying power of the 1970s, minimum wage would need to be $66 an hour. So, like, when you put it into those sorts of perspectives, it is a very unequal time that we are living in, and it's because of all of the policies that Australian governments, mostly Howard, who turbocharged it with Peter Costello, and then every Labor government who did not do anything to address it because of a fear of a voter backlash and not being able to necessarily defend their beliefs even when they were right, so 2019, has meant that we now have a very, very unequal situation where my generation can't afford a house, but we can afford avocado on toast. So, swings and roundabouts. And I was thinking about it, like, in the press gallery, of which I'm still a member. I'm contributing editor of the New Daily, so I still cover politics. The press gallery seniors came to their own political power professionally when John Howard was in government. And that's their idea of a stable government. It is one leader, everyone falls in under the leader. If there's discussions in cabinet, that's fine because the leader says what's going to happen and then everybody does what the leader does and says, and that's how you run a government. There's no room for debate. So every single time that there is a policy discussion and Labor has its two factions, if they even still exist, argue over a policy, that's chaos and confusion, because it's not everyone falling under the one leader. And so I think that that is the prism of which how most of the press gallery view politics. When I was covering Queensland state politics, it was kind of the same thing. People were constantly looking for the disagreement because a lot of the seniors in the Queensland press gallery when I was here, which was 2012, 2015, the Newman era, and into the Palaszczuk era, people were used to just consistent government not having any disagreement, saying this is how it's done, and anything outside of that was just batshit crazy and obviously bad government. And so you get that prism, but then you throw in this false idea of objectivity, which is, as journalists, we suddenly enter a newsroom and every life experience we've ever had leaves our bodies, and we become very pure beings who only look at facts, and we have no opinions on these facts because we are just a fact ourselves. We're very objective. You laugh, but at one point Lee Sales tweeted that she was happy that people didn't know whether she believed in climate change or not. You know, this is when she was one of the leading political journalists in the country, saying, I'm proud that you don't know if I believe in climate change or not. Well, it's not about whether it's not the tooth fairy. But that is how journalism works. But I think that journalism has become as corporate as the politics that it covers, and that is the reason why we have journalists who have just basically fallen in line about what the centre is and what the boundaries are. And you say, well, let Richard talk, but you say that it's like...
I like it when Amy talks. So.
You talk about how it's anticipating is a skill. No, a lot of journalists are told how it's going to play out. And so then that becomes their thought, and then they start going, well, sources have told me that this is going to be X, Y, Z, Today's story, for instance, was that Susan Lee has announced the first policy of a future coalition government to unrecognise Palestine. So the story today was that in, let's say, 6 years at best, probably a decade, the coalition, if it still exists and it's in power, will unrecognise a state that Australia has recognised for the past decade. And that was an actual story that was run by very serious news outlets today, as if it mattered. So to go back to centrism, how did we get here and how do we get out of it?
Well, I think we have to understand that we didn't sort of stumble into this centre. And one way of thinking about politics is, well, I'll start somewhere else. I just assume everyone involved in professional politics who's been elected to Parliament is good at something. And if you can't see what they're good at, it's you that's missing it. All right? No, I know that's hard. People are like, oh, Barnaby Joyce. It's like, no, actually... No, he's clever, right? And let's be clear, he went to,
Are we counting the Senate?
Yeah, yes, I am, because they had the rat cunning, if nothing else.
Okay, all right, yep.
No, that's a skill, right? They got the rat cunning to get pre-selected into a safe Senate seat. All right, so Barnaby Joyce went to one of the most expensive private schools in Sydney, St Ignatius Riverview, looks like, Harry Potter land, right? And then went off and did the radical thing of trained as an accountant at university, all right? And then has confected this kind of political persona, which literally involves him shouting at clouds, at Christmas time. You must have seen the video, all right? But he was the Deputy Prime Minister, okay? All that smoke and mirrors of that persona got him power, got him some of the things he wanted.
Matt Canavan's an economist.
Matt Canavan was former Productivity Commission economist, once upon a time an economic rationalist. So all of these people, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So and most people are kind of cynical about politics, but I guess I would argue, and I have some fun examples in the book, I don't think most people are cynical enough. So I'm going to give you a couple examples tonight of how these are clever people who are better at manipulating people than you might think. Now, I know they wouldn't trick you, but maybe the person sitting next to you might fall for some of these tricks. Like, I know you're the smart one in the room, okay? But other people in the room, not so smart. Okay, so let me give you an example. What I think, the modern Labor Party is particularly good at, and that's fine, they won the election, they're legitimately elected government, they've got political skills, of course they do. One of their great skills is to literally invent policy positions that are not designed to solve a policy problem, they're designed to create a political problem. So I'll use climate change as a good example of this. I call Labor's approach to climate the game of percents. So whenever it comes to climate, whether it's emission reduction targets or renewable energy targets or hydrogen, whatever, there'll be a number, there'll be a percent. And whatever percent they pick, they've picked it knowing the Greens will say, we want more percents than that. And the Liberals will say, that's too many percents. And Labor will go, look at me in the sensible centre, hey? Look at me just getting the balance right. Like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Those extreme Greens want more percents. Those crazy Libs want less percents. And here I am delivering the right number of sensible centre percents. Now, that's not the end of the world, but that's just the
could be.
Well, it could be. If they keep winning, we lose. Fair point. Where the trick works is that having kind of set out to say, well, we want this many percents, or maybe we want this many dollars, but percents are the most common one. Ideally, and this is the cynicism, ideally, having announced this perfectly centrist policy, nothing happens. Because those nasty Greens won't pass it in the Senate, and those nasty Libs won't pass it in the Senate. So even though I brought forward my ambitious but still pragmatic proposal, actually nothing happens. Which, by the way, I was whispering to the powerful group at the beginning, don't worry, this will never get through the Senate. Imagine that. Imagine if they were so smart and they were so cynical that they cooked up policy that sounded sensible and sounded pragmatic, anticipating that the criticism of it would prove that it was pragmatic, and that they'd gone and told the powerful group, whether it was the gambling industry or the fossil fuel industry or anywhere else, don't worry, this will get nowhere. This won't ever be getting through the Senate. Imagine if other people were that cynical. So when you see centrism as a political trick, you can diagnose what's happening in Parliament quite differently. Because, of course, if I'm the Prime Minister saying, well, I want to do this and the Greens won't do this and the Liberals won't do that, so I'm stuck, the Greens are making the perfect the enemy of the good. No, the government is. Right? If you're the Prime Minister and you want to get something done, and you're unwilling to make a compromise to get it done, then by definition, you're the one making the perfect the enemy of the good. When John Howard wanted the GST, he couldn't get it through the Senate. The Democrats said no. They said, well, take food out and we'll pass it. And Peter Costello said, that's a stupid idea. And John Howard said, yeah, it's a stupid idea, but I'd rather have a GST on 90% of stuff. John Howard wanted to get the legislation through. Does that mean he was radical? Or that he was actually willing to pragmatically compromise to get most of what he wanted? Now, the easy way to kind of prove this point is the counterexample. In the first term, the Albanese government was very keen to get industrial relations reform through. You never heard Albo say, I really want to get this IR laws through, but the Greens want me to go further and the Libs won't let me, so I guess I'll have to do nothing. He was serious about getting IR reform through. So when the Greens said, oh, well, we'll pass it, but only with amendments to toughen it up, sold, no problem, next. Right, so when you're the Prime Minister, when you're in charge of agenda setting, when you're the one bringing the legislation forward, if the legislation's stuck and you can't get it advanced, that's on you. But the trick of centrism is to say, oh no, I wanted to put perfect policy forward, but no one would let me, so I did nothing instead. So
what happens when sometimes it looks like the agreement could be made and
well,
you don't want it to be made, Richard?
Well, thank you for setting me up with a Dorothy Dixer. See, Parliament's it's all confected, right? You know that the questions in Parliament aren't legit.
Everyone here knows what a Dorothy Dixer is, right?
Yeah, it's when a backbench Labor MP says, Prime Minister, is housing a problem and what policies do you have to address it? The Prime Minister says...
And are there any alternative views?
Yeah. The Prime Minister stands up and spends 3 minutes saying how great their policy is and attacks the Liberals, right? Everyone knows that question time is confected. Well, what if the legislation getting introduced was just as confected? So I just gave you the example of when they were serious about IR reform, they were happy to compromise. Good, that's what you should do. But in the last term, the Prime Minister's, best friend, would we call her, Tanya Plibersek?
Yeah. They go way back to the beginning of the left faction?
Yeah,
yep.
So closest confidant, best friend, was given the task of negotiating with the Greens to create an Environmental Protection Act.
What we like to call in the business a shit sandwich.
So, to be clear, let's think about it now that we've got this kind of prism of centrism. So, Tanya, go out there and, try to negotiate an EPA with the Greens. The election's not far away, so obviously you'll fail, and we'll go to the election saying we tried to get an EPA up, but those nasty Greens, they wanted it too strong, and the nasty Liberals wanted it too weak. Oh, woe is me. But that nasty, nasty Tanya Plibersek went and actually negotiated a deal and actually landed a deal with the Greens on an EPA that Tanya was happy with and Sarah Hanson-Young was happy with, and they were happy. So what did the Prime Minister have to do? Come in over the top and say, no, deal's off, deal's off. Sorry, we accidentally solved a problem. Tanya didn't get the memo. She got the memo. She was causing enormous trouble by actually solving a problem. But what the newspapers reported was that the West Australian mining industry had rung the Prime Minister's office and said, you can't have an EPA. And that's kind of true, but it's worse than that. They only had to ring because it was never supposed to happen. So unfortunately, while centrism sounds like, oh, we listen to all the arguments, we put it in the blender and out comes a smoothie that we can all kind of live with, the reality, I would argue, is that the idea of centrism is being used to conceal inaction, to narrow the agenda, and to, unfortunately, just create political cover for doing nothing.
So that's cheery. So how do we get out of it?
Well, I think we should get out of it. I think everything I've just described is problematic. I reckon most people in here are happy with it. Sorry, that was a joke. No, but this is the thing, it's a democracy, right? But it's not up to Richard what's good policy and bad policy.
It's up to me.
It's up to Amy. Yeah. She's an independent journalist. Yeah. My point is that this, the idea that politicians might use cynical tricks, announce an inquiry even though they know an answer, announce an inquiry because they're just trying to buy time because they don't want to answer it. We all kind of know that. And ultimately, if we keep voting for the same people time after time, then, I don't know, maybe people think that's fine. But I don't think most people do think it's fine. And that's why even after this election, with a landslide, which I'll come back to, for Labor, the percentage of Australians voting for the major parties, the trend has continued to fall. So I think a lot of people are increasingly frustrated by that. I think there are lots of sort of structural reasons for that and cultural reasons for it. But I think the shorthand is that in Australia we have quite a unique political culture where, because we don't let members of parliament cross the floor, because we don't let members of parliament say out loud what they actually think, they have to come up with these kind of binding Labor position and binding Liberal position, which are so totalising, so dominating, that everyone in the Labor Party has to agree on the latest Labor Party position, that there's just no room in public debate for kind of actual compromise, for actual centrism, for actual debating of ideas. And the consequence of that is people are either tuning out of politics altogether or tuning out from voting for the major parties. So, I think there's a lot of reasons behind it, but I think one of the consequences of it is the rising vote for independents and minor parties. One of the consequences of it is declining membership of major parties, and terrifyingly for me, one of the consequences is growing number of people saying they don't think democracy works. And that's just not in Australia, that's around the world. And just quickly, I don't write about it in the book, but like, whatever you think about Donald Trump, understand that more Americans were afraid of more of the same from Biden, like Biden's pragmatic centrism. More Americans thought Trump's worth the risk, they did, than Biden's a little bit more incrementalism from him. So, around the world, people are losing faith with democracy and the idea of, this kind of incrementalism.
Just as an experiment, who thinks that there are marked differences between Labor and the Coalition?
About half.
Yeah. Who thinks that those differences are enough for a supposed centre-right versus a centre-left party?
Not as many.
Who thinks that independents and minor parties are becoming more of the opposition and actually representing more of the mainstream? Why do you think Queensland doesn't necessarily go independent or major or minor party then? Sorry? Oh, Queensland is a cranky bitch. Yeah. I love her. She's so moody. I love her. The only state more moody than Queensland is Tasmania, which has just gone to its, third election in 4 years, something like that. I do find it interesting, though, because, I think people are engaged in politics, just not necessarily corporate politics, but they're certainly engaged through their lives. It's the hospitals, it's the roads, it's whether or not they have equality, it's standard of living, it's how they're treated. But I do think that the major parties have lost how to engage people on that. So do you think that minor parties and independents are picking that up on both ends of the spectrum, or are we actually heading for a period of disruption like what America chose with Trump and what the UK could very well choose with reform?
That's a big question.
I know. That's why I'm not allowed on Insiders anymore.
Apparently, I don't know if that means they don't want you on Insiders or they do. Look, let me answer that question starting somewhere slightly different. I don't have a problem with political parties. I don't think independents are good and parties are bad, just to be clear. I think that what's happened in Australia through a kind of combination of constitutional and cultural things is that our so-called two-party system, and the Constitution doesn't talk about parties, but it had evolved into this sort of two-party system. What happened was each party evolved to be good at beating the other party in a fight. Right? And that's a skill, that's not nothing. So Labor knows how to win a fight with the Liberal Party or the LNP in so-called marginal seats. Okay, they know how to do that. And both major parties, I kind of think of sort of World War I trench warfare. You know, there's trenches, there's barbed wire, there's artillery, and it goes for years and not much moves. All right, and the reason and World War I got stuck like that, you know, with them fighting over the marginal land for years, with no breakthroughs really, until people invented aeroplanes. All right, and then war changed radically. So I think what's happening in Australia is that the two major parties, again, got really match fit at learning how to beat each other in a fight for a marginal seat between them. But when minor parties and independents kind of attacked from the flanks or, you know, flew over the top and attacked from behind, all of a sudden the Liberals are losing their safest seats. And I say safest because by definition they weren't safe because they lost them so easily. Right? But even the terminology that there are safe seats and there are marginal seats, and if you live in a safe seat, your vote doesn't count, that's not very good for democracy. So again, I don't hate the major parties. I don't think parties are a problem, but the culture of the two major parties focusing purely on how to win a fight with each other left millions of Australian voters left out. Thinking, oh, hang on, you know, what about the things that I care about that neither of you want to talk about? So I think independents and minor parties have kind of filled that void. And I write about this in the essay, obviously, but I think to use a kind of corporate metaphor, you know, there's effectively the minor parties and independents are tech disruptors of the status quo. Once upon a time, raising money was really hard. The internet made raising money a lot easier. Once upon a time, buying ads meant full-page ads in the Courier Mail or Channel 9 TV ads. So think about if you want to run as an independent in a Brisbane seat, if you buy a full-page ad, most of the people who read it aren't even in your electorate. What a waste of money. Run an ad on Channel 9, most of the people who see the ad aren't in your electorate. What a waste of money. So historically, how could an independent or a minor party challenge a seat? Whereas with social media, they can raise the money online, spend the money targeted at a particular constituency. So, yeah, the whole kind of Labor-Liberal war machine just kind of doesn't work as well in 2025 as it did in 1995. So the issues have changed, the politics have changed, the voters have changed, but the technology has changed. And I think that the Liberal Party got a warning in 2019 when Tony Abbott lost one of the safest seats, and they ignored that warning. So then they lost 6 more of their safest seats in 2022. And then, you know, Peter Dutton did nothing to win them back and succeeded in his strategy to not win them back. That's going to happen to Labor. It's going to happen to Labor. They nearly lost one of their safest seats in Canberra. The seat of Bean was on a 15% margin. Now it's on 0.7%. To an independent, Kate Hewlett. They nearly lost...
Jessie Price.
Jessie Price. Fremantle, one of their safest seats in Perth, 12% down to less than 0.5%. Kate Hewlett. So that's not because Labor's evil and can't win elections anymore. They just won what I would call a wide but very thin landslide. Okay, so if you look up at the hill, it's a big landslide, 94 seats, that's big. But the mud's not very deep. And Labor are vulnerable to losing seats to the Liberals, to the Greens and to the Independents at the next election. So I can't remember what your question was.
I pretty much answered it. But like, what comes first then, do you think? Like, do you think hung parliaments come first in terms of people actually actively wanting a hung parliament, and the media just has to get over, like, you know, their allergy to hung parliaments and democracy being enacted as the people wish it to? Or do the major parties have a reckoning?
Both. Look, you know, so I live in the People's Republic of the ACT. It's by all sorts of accounts one of the most progressive jurisdictions in the country. We've had the chaos, I tells you, the chaos of minority government for 20 years. It's hell down there. That's where all the roundabouts came from, okay?
Yeah.
We couldn't make a decision on the intersection, so fuck it, we built a roundabout, because it's just chaos. I don't know how we get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. Washington has its insurrections, we have intersections.
And we are in charge. So just so you know, like in the ACT, the Liberal Party have been saying for 20 years now, we'll never do a deal with the Greens. And everyone's like, good. Okie doke, you're irrelevant, off you go then.
When was the last time the Liberals were in power?
20 years, right? So their determination to say, I'm not ever going to listen to the will of the people, I need to either govern in my own right or not govern at all, cheers us all up in Canberra. Right? Because, okay, never govern at all. Good to know. Off you go. But in Tasmania, the same thing's playing out, but it's Labor saying, I'd rather be in opposition than in government. Now, that's fine. That's up to them. But we're coming up to the third time that they have been in a position to form a minority government that they've gone, nah, not touching that shit. Now, okay, that's one version of democracy. But, you know, Labor call them, you hear this terminology in the last couple of years, a party of government. But just like the Liberals are a party of opposition in the ACT, Labor is saying, no, we're a party of opposition in Tasmania because if we can't have a majority government, I don't want to be in government.
Is Labor in a minority government anywhere else in the country?
Well, I don't know. Has anyone heard of New South Wales? Chaos, I tells you. Chaos. I don't know how they do it.
That's why they can't win Origin.
So, yeah, look, I think the media and, look, understandably, if you've spent your whole life trying to work your way to the top of a political party, to wind up in the position of Prime Minister or opposition leader, you've finally made it to the top. The last thing you want to do is share power with people that aren't even in your team. No, I can understand why that's not a fun idea. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says majority government good, minority government bad. The idea of a hung parliament suggests that nothing can happen, the chaos. These kind of cultural norms lead us to believe that the Gillard government, for example, was a chaotic government that couldn't get anything done. Anything like a carbon price, anything like the NDIS, anything like a royal commission into sexual assault in the church, anything like more legislation than any other parliament had passed before. Now, I don't think it's an irony or a coincidence that the Gillard government not only got so much legislation passed, but so much important legislation passed, because for Gillard to pass a bill through the lower house, where she didn't have the numbers, she had to go and sit and have a chat with the Greens and other crossbenchers and say, look, I want to pass this bill, what do you think? She had to negotiate in good faith in the lower house before the bill was passed. And surprisingly, he says, ironically, the Greens never voted for a bill in the lower house that they then opposed in the upper house. So guess what happened to every bill that passed through the lower house when Gillard was in? Went straight through the Senate. Chaos, I tells you. Chaos. Right? Our constitution that says that to make a law, it's got to pass through both houses. And if you've got a majority in the lower house and you don't have a majority in the upper house, I would argue you're in minority government. Okay? You do not have the numbers to turn the Prime Minister's will into law. You have to go and talk the crossbench or the opposition into supporting it. So, look, we've done polling on this, so have other people. Voters aren't nearly as concerned about so-called minority government or hung parliaments, or I use the term power-sharing parliaments. Right? There's no mention, there's no definition of any of these things in the Constitution. But no, I don't think voters are nearly as worried about it. And the fact that New South Wales is in minority government, I don't think anyone here knew, kind of proves that there's nothing chaotic about it.
Do we have any questions? There's a little microphone there, or if you think you can yell. Yep, lady in the white there.
I'm going to interrupt before you ask a question and say you have to ask a question. Excellent.
Why do you criticise the Constitution and its lack of describing a minority or majority without reference to the fact that the Constitution makes no allowance whatsoever for parties specifically? They're not mentioned. I don't think that we talk about minority or majority parties in our government because ideally it would have been elected representatives that weren't representing parties but rather represented constituents' voices from electorates.
Yeah, no, well, to be clear, I don't think I was criticising the Constitution. I was just trying to describe it. I agree. Oh, well, but, you know, just to be clear, the Constitution is very hard to change in Australia. And the Constitution only makes one mention of political parties. And that mention of... So the Constitution doesn't mention parties in its substantive elements. The only mention of parties in the Constitution is in there after the constitutional crisis of Whitlam, where you good folk in Queensland, after a Labor senator left office, Joe Biocchi...
A unicameral, not a bicameral, so only one House of Parliament, no...
Yep. But I guess, okay, I don't disagree with what you're saying. There's no mention of parties. I was just trying to explain the one mention that is in there, and it was an accident that basically said when someone retires, you should replace them with someone from the party they came from. Other than that, the Constitution's silent on political parties. And yeah, it's up to Parliament how it behaves. It's up to the media how they describe it. We've just, since World War II, kind of got into this two-party idea. But pre-World War II, you know, it was a shit show in there. It was chaos.
Yes?
Hey, I think in the UK they had the rule of law for centuries before they had democracy. Do you think maybe in Australia we've had the rule of law, but as with corporations and corruption, we've sort of lost the rule of law, and therefore the democracy, which is sort of founded on that, has been weakened?
Oh, look, I still think we've got some rules of some laws in Australia. I think that what we're watching in the US is genuinely terrifying. But, you know, their system is quite different to ours. But I think the lesson we can learn from the US, the lesson we can learn from the UK, is that democracy is as much a culture and a habit and a pattern of behaviour as it is of what's written down. And that's, you know, I hate to say it, that's Trump's strength, is he's just betting that other people won't arc up. And he's right. So, yeah, I think this is the weird thing. I mean, I'm about to say something really conservative. The rule of law historically has been the best way for wealthy people to hang on to their wealth. Indeed, that's where it all kind of comes from, right? Capitalism is based on all sorts of property rights and all sorts of protections for property that protect property from capricious and indeed populist governments. So it's kind of wild to watch the wealthiest people in the world kind of going, rule of law, who needs that? I reckon there'll come a day where those with the most wealth and the most power will be harking back to the good old days of some rule and some law.
You just gave a neoliberal fairy its wings. Yes, there. So.
You talk about pragmatism. I'm wondering if Albanese will ever have the ability to pass through some of the changes that the Treasury are now putting on the table.
Well, he's certainly got the power, and this is what's really important. So in this parliament, any bill that the government puts up will sail through the lower house. And any bill that this government and the Greens can agree on will sail through the Senate. This is really important. Okay, now the Greens can't make anything happen that the government doesn't want. But the government can't make anything happen that either the Greens or the Liberals don't want. So that's where the pragmatism is really going to bite. And that's my point, that you've got to be very careful when someone says, look, here is my opening gambit, here is my opening offer, and no negotiation will be entered into. This law that I present before thee is perfect in all forms. That's not how John Howard got the GST through. That's not how John Howard got Telstra privatised. That's not how John Howard got work choices through. That's not how Albo got reforms to IR in its last term through. So you've got to be, I guess, what is pragmatic? Well, that's in the eye of the beholder. But what everyone needs to understand is anything that Labor and the Greens agree on can happen. Right? As radical as you can imagine, if Labor and the Greens want a wealth tax tomorrow, there, done, fixed it. Whether that will happen or not, that's up to you.
Perfect example of pragmatism was the NAC, where the Greens were pushing to pass it with open public hearings, a lot more powers, a lot more investigative powers, and Labor said that that wasn't bipartisan and deliberately went the private hearing route in order to pass it with the coalition. So, yeah, pragmatism. Yes, sorry, there in the white jumper. In Australia. What are your thoughts on that and how that will impact our national security? Yeah, great question. So there's a proposal for Santos to be sold to foreign owners. It needs to be approved by the Foreign Investment Review Board. That decision is underway. There's nothing public about the Foreign Investment Review Board process, but ultimately it's a decision for Jim Chalmers as Treasurer and the Cabinet. We polled it, and actually, just before I tell you about the poll, who here has heard that Santos is up for sale with a likely foreign buyer? Okay, yeah, half, 2/3. We polled and asked people, how do you feel about foreign company buying Australian gas company? 3% of people thought it was a good idea. 3%. Now, to put this into context, Australia is one of the largest exporters of gas in the world. Our gas production has tripled since 2015, and apparently we have a shortage of gas. We do not have a shortage of gas, but it's very, very, very profitable to export gas, especially if you are the owner of the enormous gas export facilities in Gladstone, which are really kind of the world's largest refrigerators, and they were built at a cost of $60 billion. And if we decided to keep more gas on shore and sell it to Australian manufacturing at a low price, the people that own the $60 billion worth of fridges don't make money that way. So we have this enormous political pressure to keep approving new gas projects so we can keep pumping gas through these enormous refrigerators, or the people that own the world's most expensive fridges will go broke. So what's this got to do with the Santos and Foreign Investment Review Board decision? I think it's a terrible idea to sell it, because at the moment, I'm not making this up, more than half the gas we export is given away for free. For free. No royalties, no petroleum resource rent tax, nothing, nada, zip. The only return to Australia from these gas projects is the profits. So when we sell the gas companies to foreign shareholders, we give gas away for free, they don't pay any tax, and all of the profits would flow offshore. I mean, I think this is about as dumb as things get. But the problem is then once we sell it offshore, I get told, well, we can't change the rules, Richard, or you'll scare off foreign investors, sovereign risk. So, yeah, I just think it's a bad idea in the short term and a risky idea in the medium term. And only 3% of people want it, but it'll probably happen. Yeah, well, if there's one thing you can count on with Australian politics is that it can always get dumber. So I know a lot of you have a lot more questions. The good news is that Richard will be out there signing copies of his book where you can ask him directly. But you can also email us, and it may not be immediate, but we will get back to you as soon as we can. We love hearing from supporters. I don't entirely love debating with supporters, but I'm always happy to hear all of the thoughts that you have. So please do email us if you have any other questions.
And can I say one more thing? So what didn't happen tonight, probably because we cut off questions before it came, and I say this with love, is we didn't get to the question where someone says, Richard, thank you, that was great.
I don't think anyone said that.
No, well, you cut them off. But then it comes with the great progressive but. But I feel like you're preaching to the converted. See, you knew you were here. I've had a great night, I've learned something, but I still have progressive guilt because everyone here feels this way, and what else are you doing? So here's the answer. This is not the only talk that I'll give this week. You're not the only audience that we'll talk to, and we do give talks all around the country. But here's the other thing. Somehow progressives have been trained to believe in Australia that getting together with people that agree with them is somehow a bad thing to do. Now, you know what the church does every Sunday? Preaches to the fucking converted. It's the best organising strategy. All right? So, to be clear, it is not enough. It is not enough to just talk to people who already agree with you. And maybe that's the people here tonight, maybe it's not. It's not enough. But boy, it's a lot. And it's really important. And if you look around, go on, take a minute, look around. You are not alone in thinking that pragmatism might be killing us and we need to actually tackle big problems and we want our elected representatives, whatever they are, independent or party, we want them to be bolder and braver. You're not alone. And it's important that you know you're not alone. And actually that's part of driving change. It's not all of it, but it's part of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Dennis. Thank you again very much for joining us, and yes, please do contact us if you want to have a chat outside in the foyer or buy a book and continue to support work, and just remember, be angry, yell at people when you're right, and support those who are unable to yell. So thank you.
Thanks for watching. We love that we can make these videos free to watch, but they're not free to make. It's thanks to our generous supporters that we can keep making research and content that changes minds. So, if you like what we do, please consider giving to the Australia Institute so we can keep doing it. Visit our website australiainstitute.org.au and click the donate button to see how your support can help fund high quality research that matters.